Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the local review body of the February the 4th. My name is Councillor Henry Anderson, and I am convener of the local review body. On my left is Councillor James, and on my right, Councillor Gray. They will be the three councillors that will be deciding on the business in front of us today. On the far right is Mr Harrison, Planning Advisor to the LRB, who is not part of the Planning Department and has no previous involvement in any of the applications we have before us today. On the left of Councillor James is our Legal Advisor, Mr Colin Elliott. On the far left is Mr Williams from Committee Services. In front right is Planning is Christine Bryan. Before we commence the business of the day, can I inform you that today's meeting will be recorded and will be available on the Council website. The House rules: all electronic devices shall be switched off or in silent mode. There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest fire exit. Firstly, can I ask if there's any declarations of interests by members on any of the items on today's agenda? No. Thank you. Now, can we note the minute of the last meeting? Noted. Happy with it? No. Thank you. Now, we can move on to the first item on the agenda, which is 4.1. The erection of a dwelling house in principle, land 40 metres northeast of Old Piggery, Blair Forge. Is there anyone here to represent? Are you quite happy where you are, or do you want to come further forward? Okay, right, Mr Harrison, can you proceed with this application?
Thank you, Convener. Can I first of all check everybody can hear what I'm saying? That's fine, thank you. As you say, this is a planning application in principle for the erection of a house at land 40 metres northeast of the Old Piggery, Blair Forge. The rectangular site slopes slightly from the north to south and extends to some 840 square metres. It is accessed from a private cul-de-sac. The applicant's house lies to the south. An access track and mature trees lie to the west. The northern and eastern boundaries are defined by post and wire fencing onto the surrounding farmland. Now, I'll just take you through some photographs now to illustrate this, but you might like to have pages 45 onwards to provide you with a location plan and the site plan. The applicant has also submitted a number of photographic illustrations in support of the proposal, and they're on page 75 onwards. The general sequence of the photographs will be the existing housing and access, then the site from the western, then the northern, then the eastern, and finally the southern boundaries. So I say this is us looking in a southerly direction down the existing private access road. And you'll see this as sort of a modern bungalow among some of the other modern housing which front onto that access road. So as to say, we swing round from that and we look in the opposite direction and we see the Old Piggery, the name of the house, which is in the applicant's house there, and the blue line defining their boundary at that point. Moving on from that, as it were, we go up and look past that up towards the application site itself, and of course the hill rising beyond. This is us looking in a northerly direction and going up the access road, getting towards the application site from that position. We then look across the garden ground adjacent to the Old Piggery, and then the site itself beyond, and then again the countryside beyond that again. Moving from that position, we now move into where the application, shall we say, the tarmac ends and the track continues to reach the application site proper. And from there we move up to the application site, sorry, I should have said, we swing round to the left-hand side of that photograph to start off with, and this is looking in the westerly direction towards the countryside on that side of the access track. From that position, I say we move up to the application site, and this is us looking in an easterly direction. As you can see, you're looking with the extreme right, on the extreme right-hand side of the photograph, we have the applicant's current garden, and beyond that, of course, the application site at that end adjacent to it. From that position, we move round, as it were, sweeping towards the left of that photograph, looking up, as it were, the main body of the application site itself. From there, we move further up, swing round again to the left, catching the trees adjacent to the track on that side. From that position, we move up to the far corner, as it were. This is us looking at the northern boundary of the site now, and you can see there's sort of a double fence arrangement here and a gate into the adjoining field at that point. And from that position, we then move to the far corner at that northern boundary. I think there's a reference within the papers to some trees previously having been felled by the adjoining farmer, and you see some evidence of that here, assuming that's the trees that are being referred to. And from that northeastern corner, we then have a number of photographs swinging around towards the right. And this is, as I say, looking easterly across the farmland. This is us right on that boundary of the application site. Then swinging around again to the right of that photograph, we look back down from where we were to start off with to the old piggery itself. So that's us looking in a southerly direction now. Swinging around again to the right of that photograph, we're catching just the corner of the old piggery, as it were, and the trees on the far side of the access track, and of course the countryside beyond that in a westerly direction. And then swinging round again to the right of that photograph, we're looking back along that northerly boundary. From that position, we then move down to the other corner adjacent to the existing garden ground and look back up the application site, as it were, in full. This is us looking from the southeastern corner, looking in that northerly direction. And then if we swing round to the left of that, we look again at that junction between the garden ground of the old piggery and the application site. And just as a detail, there's reference to recent hedge planting having taken place, and this is an example of it. So I'll just leave you that general photograph of the application site in relation to the old piggery. Turning first of all in summary to the applicant's case, the report of handling contains inaccuracies and contradictions, including a recommendation for approval. The site is part of the settlement of Blair Forge. It is seen as part of the garden of the old piggery and is included in the title deeds for that property. The current fence has been in place for some 70 years or more. This has been supplemented by recent hedge planting. The site is viewed as the last area for development at Blair Forge. Local residents and the Community Council have been consulted and raised no objections and are also seen as being supportive of the proposal. The site, which is unsightly and unused, is seen as complying with the Housing in the Countryside policy criteria regarding an extension to a building group and as an infill site. The proposal reflects and extends the pattern of housing at Blair Forge, including the 2 nearby houses built since 2004. It is also seen as an infill between the existing house and the rising hill ground to the north. The mature trees that have been uprooted were removed by an adjoining farmer and not by the applicant. The site is not considered to be highly visible, as the public road is some 350 metres away. The site is also seen as being capable of accommodating a house without raising any concerns regarding overlooking or overshadowing. Turning now in summary to the officer's report of handling. In planning terms, the site is viewed as being agricultural rather than domestic, regarding its past and current land use. The local development plan does not identify Blair Forge as a settlement. The proposal fails to be assessed against the criteria of the Housing in the Countryside policy and associated guidance. In that context, Blair Forge Blair Forge constitutes a building group. Support for development that extends a building group is mainly dependent on the site being defined by existing topography and or well-established landscape features, which would provide a suitable setting. This proposal is not assessed as being acceptable, as the northern and eastern boundaries of the site are only defined by post and wire fencing and some recent hedge planting. In its wider context, the site is seen as being open to the surrounding landscape and does not enjoy a sense of enclosure that would provide a setting. Its development is seen as eroding the landscape quality of the locality. Development is also seen as a form of ribbon development. Although unused at present, the site does not meet the criteria as brownfield land in terms of the guidance, as it was not formally occupied by buildings. In terms of its size and position relative to the adjoining house, the site would be capable of accommodating a house without raising problems of overlooking or overshadowing. In this instance, there are no representations. There is, however, a request for both a site visit and a hearing. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Is there any questions for officers on this application for review?
Sorry, the photograph that's up there, you said about the recent planting on the eastern boundary. I take it that's the eastern boundary. Are you including those shrubs outside the fencing as recent planting, or is that all?
No, the recent planting was what I referred to in the earlier that earlier photograph, which gives you an indication of that planting. The other planting you see in the later photograph is effectively in the adjoining farmland in the field, out with the application site, and as I understand it, out with the applicant's control and ownership.
Thank you.
If that's all the questions, can I ask members, can we proceed to determine the application for review based on the information that is before us? That is information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor. Thank you. I'll let Councillor James start the debate.
Thank you, Convener. This is an unusual one, and I did go down and have a look, took a walk up there, and I think this, the refusal is on the grounds of ribbon development and being within a landscape containment. In my mind, I also did an aerial Google map to have a look, and I think this site is well defined, and I think to the northern boundary that there is a gateway which goes up the lane. There's a footpath which I think gives us a clear boundary. There was a photograph earlier on of where the farmer had removed the tree. A lot of rubble there. I think that provides us a clear enough boundary, and I would be minded to allow this. I don't think this is a ribbon development. I think it's a suitable site, and I personally think we should allow this.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gray.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I've got to say I'm very close to Councillor James's opinions here. This is a cul-de-sac. It's a cul-de-sac in a very rural area. It's not as if it's ribbon development along a well-used road, which is quite commonplace and understandably ribbon development in such areas has a disadvantage from a safety point of view, more entrances onto a public road. There's no entrance onto a public road here. This is a very, it couldn't be more private out in the countryside, frankly. Moreover, page 31 showed an old map from 1930s or 40s or something, and it was clearly part of the active hamlet. That strip of land was clearly part of an active hamlet. Now, many hamlets had such things. There was areas that were used for piggeries, they might have been used for goats or something else, and that's exactly what it is. It's always been part of the hamlet. It's just another part of the piggery, in fact. And really, I think that defines it as part of a site similar to what's already been developed on. And really, I think this would be a completion of the ribbon development, if that's what it's to be called, which I wouldn't call it, in fact. I would just say it was referred to by, I think, the applicant as an infill site. Yes, it is, but it's a terminal infill site. Frankly, I'm quite happy with the application. Happily approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. I have looked at this too. I've been out and had a site visit. I would disagree with my colleagues. I think this is a ribbon development. I know the site from years before, and it looks as if there's been a gradual move up the hill, up the side of the track, and this is another one. That site hasn't been, it looks to me as if it hasn't been that long since it was part of a field or been grazed. The only difference between looking on the left-hand side of that picture and the right-hand side is perhaps 2 or 3 years of it not being grazed or being used as such, leaving that clumps of grass. One can see that even the shrubs and that coming through there are fairly recent. So I would not have been keen to allow this to go. I would have agreed with our planning department on this, but I've been outvoted 2-1.
Members, I think that's by majority would be to grant and subject to suitable conditions, informatives, etc. Now, as I understand it from Councillors James and Gray, that you believe it accords with the local development plan and with policy. Yes. And Councillor Anderson dissenting, largely in line with the reasons of the appointed officer. Yes. I'll pass over to Mr. Harrison. Anything to add in terms of conditions?
I don't think so. Just you're referring to potential conditions there. I'd maybe mention that there's a reference in the papers to the need for potential further investigation in relation to the comments from in relation to stability in the coal matters. Past coal mining, that is. So maybe to draw that to your attention in relation to possible conditions.
So your application has been successful today, and no doubt planning will be in contact with you with all the relevant details. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 4.2, which is the erection of a shed at 10 Kinman Drive, Perth. Is there anyone, do you want to come forward, or are you quite happy where you are? Okay, Mr. Harrison, will you
Thank you, Convener. As you say, this is a detailed planning application for the erection of a shed at 10 Kilman Drive, Perth. The single-storey pitched roof shed would be located in the rear garden of this semi-detached house. It would measure some 4.8 metres by 4.7 metres in plan area and some 3 metres to the ridge. It would be of hardwood timber construction. The rear garden measures some 7.5 metres by some 10 metres. The specific purpose of the shed identified by the applicant would be to accommodate a snooker table. Now I'll just take you to the photographs now, but you might like to page 111 onwards available, which provides you with the location plan and details of the proposed buildings. The sequence of the photographs will be the street frontage and then the rear garden area. So I say this is us on the main street, as it were, in Kinman Drive itself, and number 10 is identified there, as well as the application site. So we move from that position, as it were, into the rear garden area, and obviously the rear garden contains materials which I assume is in relation to the construction of the shed, but say just to give you the sweep of that, this is the eastern boundary of that rear garden area, and then swinging round to the left of that, we see the continuation of that boundary, and then swinging round again to the left, the rear garden area, and again to the left, we have that western boundary, and again to the left, this is us looking towards the adjoining property where there's been a recent extension take place, as well as some ancillary buildings within the garden ground of that property. And again to the left of that, we turn round and look at, as it were, the real elevation of number 10. So I'll just leave you with that general photograph of the rear garden area. Turning first of all in summary to the applicant's case, the applicant's first and second proposals for a slightly larger shed were declined. This proposal further reduces its size. Now it only is seen as being just fit for its intended purpose to contain a snooker table. Garage doors have been added to facilitate queuing. The shed would only occupy some 29% of the garden area. It would be well constructed and would not be detrimental to the area. None of the neighbours have objected to the proposal. The applicant intends to remove the shed should he move house. The shed is not viewed as a permanent structure. It is noted that a large conservatory extension, in addition to 2 other garden buildings, are present in the adjoining rear garden. Turning now in summary to the officer's report of handling, this proposal requires planning permission as permitted development rights were suspended through the conditions of the original planning permission for this housing development. This restriction was applied due to the limited private amenity space of the semi-detached and terraced houses, and the prospect of later extensions and outbuildings adversely affecting neighbouring amenity. This is the third proposal for a shed in the rear garden, the previous proposals having been declined by the planning officer and the local review body. This proposal involves a further reduction in the footprint of the proposed shed by an additional 2.4 square metres. However, it is still seen as having an excessive footprint relative to the limited size of the garden. It would occupy some 22 square metres of the 70 square metre rear garden area. Of the remaining garden, some 45 square metres is seen as the usable space. It is the officer's view that the garden is not sufficiently large to accommodate the building without adversely affecting the residential amenity of the existing 3-bedroom house. As the shed is intended to accommodate a snooker table, it would not be expected to provide much storage capacity for other domestic purposes. The proposal also limits the ability of the remaining garden to accommodate such elements as a drying area and bin storage, contrary to Local Development Plan Policy RD1 Criteria C. It is noted that the draft placemaking guidance envisages a minimum garden area for a 3-bedroom house to be 80 square metres. It is acknowledged that a future occupant could remove the shed. The design of the shed does not raise any concerns regarding the amenity of the neighbours. In this case, there are no representations and there is neither a request for a site visit nor a hearing. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr Harrison. Is there any questions for officers on this application? Councillor Gray.
Mr Henderson, does the ground slope in which direction?
I think you can assume it's practically level throughout in both directions. The general slope is slightly downhill, shall we say, looking at the photograph from the boundary on the left-hand side to the right-hand side. That's the general direction of the slope of the houses as they step down on Kilman Drive. But for all intents and purposes, the area of the site is more or less level.
Right, okay. Right, thanks.
Any more questions? Right, thank you. Thank you, members. Can we now proceed to determine the application for review based on the information that is before us? That is information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor. Happy to,
Oh, sorry, you speak to me.
happy to proceed.
Yeah, certainly.
I'll let you start the debate then.
Okay. It's, you know, in a way it's a wee bit like the last one. It doesn't quite comply, but it's not miles away. Each site has its own peculiarities. The last one, you know, we saw what was peculiar about it. This one here has got its specific factors, and one of the main ones to my mind is it's a north-facing site in as much as back-lying to the house. Therefore, that means to me that this garden does not receive an awful lot of sunlight or sunshine. Amenity space would be lessened with a shed, but then it would be used for entertainment purposes or recreational purposes, just like other people who build other facilities out the back, whether it's a gazebo or a greenhouse, glass house, whatever. It's slightly larger than it might be. It might be of a scale that would still accommodate bins, for that matter. The applicant has said it's very much something that not everybody would want, would be a snooker table in their back garden. Maybe if we all had access to a nice big snooker table, we would. I won't say I'm torn here. I just cannot see that we need refuse this. I don't think the shed is something that every purchaser would wish to keep necessarily. Some might. And I just see already over the fence there is a shed being built. Looking the other way from the photographs, you could see there's a variety of different things that have been built in the backyards. Probably all because there is limited sunshine gets into that back fence, backyard. Somebody might know better, but that's the way I see it. And it's making a use that the resident wants, and I'm not going to deny it.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thanks, Convener. And I'll echo everything that Councillor Gray has said. I think this application has come in 3 times and it has been reduced in size for the 3rd time, to the point where it's going to be very difficult to do anything that he wants to do in it if it were to reduce any more. Looking at the space, it's an amenity space, and he will be providing an amenity, albeit for his own home, and that's the whole purpose of this. Looking at the space there, it doesn't look like a well-used area, and I'd rather see a garden used for recreational purposes. I mean, it looks like it's gravel there, and I think would add value to his home. And a shed is a shed. It's a temporary building. If somebody were to come in and buy the house, then the chances are they'd probably have it removed anyway. So I'd actually be in favour of allowing this.
Thank you, councillors. Well, once again, I'm in the minority. Last time I said you were trying to put a quart into a pint pot. It's a wee bit smaller than a quart, but it still won't fit in a pint pot as far as I'm concerned. The whole reason, and I know it's quite, I can understand your feelings about it, but the reason that permitted development was suspended for these back gardens was because of the space, very limited space. Therefore, if it had been of a normal size back garden, you wouldn't have had this issue. Unfortunately, it is very tight. As I say, you have reduced the size, that admittedly, but it's still, in my view, the wrong thing in the wrong place. But however, this time you've been successful, and I'll pass over to Mr. Elliott to carry out the...
Thank you, Convener. I think by majority that is grant, subject to suitable conditions and informatives. And I want to be clear as to the reasoning here, because I wasn't quite sure. You were saying it was very balanced. Are you saying it accords with the local development plan, or are you saying it's marginally over, however there's justification for it?
It is marginally over. I think the justification of it, sheltered behind a two-storey house, on the north side of a two-storey house, does justify some alternative facility to using it as a sunning area, which it isn't. Had it been behind a bungalow, it would have been a sunny area, and maybe the demand for some other facility out of that would be there.
Could I say, I think it would be, you wouldn't say there was a significant adverse impact. I think that, would that be
I
correct?
don't think so, simply because there are so many other already buildings out there.
Okay. So that would be grant subject to suitable conditions and informatives for the reasons given. That wouldn't, although not according to the LDP, you're saying it wouldn't be significant adverse impact. Councillor Anderson, you would be, I feel like the dissenting minority. You're saying it largely in line with the appointed officer to refuse. Mr. Harrison, anything on conditions?
The only thing that might, and I stress might, occur is there was a lack of clarity in terms of the drawings as to whether or not the proposed walling would be vertical or horizontal timber work. And that might be worthy of clarification if members thought that was desirable.
I would see in keeping with the surrounding fences would be that would be vertical.
Preference, to be honest.
Apart from anything else, it's more sustainable as vertical in terms of maintaining the roof.
Yeah.
Is it shiplap? It's shiplap. Shiplap. I'll leave it up to you guys. You're the guys.
I don't have a preference, to be honest, and I don't think it should be conditioned as to whether it's horizontal.
I didn't realise that there was a specific design on it, to be honest. If it's shiplap, then that does maintain itself simply because it's I don't honestly think man is a game.
No, that's why I said that I'm not saying it's critical, it's whether or not you wish to consider it.
It would be good if it was the same colour as the church. That could be to blend in better, and that's not a big issue.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Harrison? I think you've got
No.
general views of members there. Okay.
So this time you've been successful, and no doubt someone will be in touch with you about how to go about this. Thank you. I don't want my back getting wet. We're moving on nicely. Now we're on to item 3, which is alterations and extensions to a dwelling house 41 Coltwood Holding, Campmuir, Blairgowrie. Take it there's no one here. No. So, Mr. Harrison, we'll just
Thank
carry
you,
on.
Convener. There's a detailed planning application for the alteration and extension of a dwelling house at 41 Coltwood Holding, beg your pardon, Campmuir. The application site contains a detached house, garage and garden area. It fronts onto the main road through Campmuir. The proposal concerns the erection of a pitched roof extension over an existing single-storey flat-roofed extension which lies to the side of the original bungalow. The accommodation would provide 2 additional bedrooms and a bathroom within the roof space that would be created. I'll take you to the photographs now, but you might like to have page 159 onwards, provide you the location plan, the site plan and drawings of the proposal. The applicant has also submitted a number of photographic illustrations in support of their proposal, and that's on page 129 onwards. The general sequence of the photographs will be the adjoining property, then the street frontage, then the elevations of the house and the broader street context. So this is, as it were, on the adjoining street, and I include this because it shows the potato sheds that are referred to in the applicant's papers. And they say this is looking in a southerly direction up to the junction with the main road through Campmuir, which the property fronts onto. And this photograph includes, of course, the property, which again is referred to in the papers, called Ayana, which, as you can see, has a fairly pronounced steep pitched roof and fronts onto that side road. So if we move from there up to the main road, as it were, we then are at that junction I mentioned earlier, and this is us looking in an easterly direction, and that's just an example of the property on the other side of the junction from Ayana. And if we swing round to the left of that, we catch Ayana again from that junction position, and we start to pick up on the applicant's property as well, number 41. Again, swinging to the left of that photograph, we look past and include number 41, looking, I say, in that westerly direction and slightly down the slope. And you can see the other adjoining properties, which are a mixture of bungalows and 1.5-storey properties. So moving from that position, we look directly at the proposed position of the proposed extension over the existing flat-roofed extension on that side of number 41. And moving on from that position, but still in the main road, we're looking back at the property, but also seeing it in relation to the pitched roof of Ayana. From there, we swing round to the left again, and we're catching the garage, which is within the garden ground of number 41, but also the adjoining bungalow. From that position, we move, as it were, into the access drive to number 41, and you get the whole of the property from that position. From there, we go further in, and we now look at the side elevation of the extension as it stands at the moment. And then moving further in again, we now look at the rear elevation of the property. From there, back round to the front, and the purpose of this photograph is really just to give you an indication of the roof forms of the existing extension and the main house, as it were. And if we step back from that, I'll leave you with that general photograph which shows you the garage associated with the property, the position of the existing extension, which would be enlarged, and the existing original hipped roof cottage. Turning first of all in summary to the applicant's case, the proposal does not increase the footprint of the house. There is an eclectic mix of modern house designs and building forms, including extensions in the locality which have been approved by the council. And photographs of these and details of that assessment have been submitted to illustrate this aspect of the applicant's proposal. Many of these have involved extensions that change the proportions, scale, eaves and ridge heights of the original buildings. There are also large modern farm buildings directly opposite the house. The existing extension was designed and constructed in terms of its structure to enable an additional story to be added. The wall head has been uplifted by some 800 millimetres to enable sufficient and comfortable floor-to-ceiling height internally within the proposed extension. The replacement of the existing flat roof with a pitched slate roof is viewed as improving the appearance of the house and minimises future maintenance. The proposed steep roof form is similar to the adjoining house to the east, Iana. The property is partially enclosed by trees on 3 sides. In conclusion, whilst the extension may not entirely reflect the policies PM1A and PM1B Part C, there is considered to be sufficient reasons put forward to support the proposal. Turning now in summary to the officer's report of handling, alterations and extensions are acceptable subject to detailed consideration of the scale, form, massing, design, position, proportions and materials being used. The original house has a 30-degree pitched roof in a hipped roof form. Although sizable, the flat-roofed extension is currently subservient to the original bungalow. It is recognised that the houses in this locality enjoy generous gardens and vary considerably in design, form and scale. Most are single-storey in appearance. The proposal envisages raising the eaves level of the extension by some 800 millimetres, and the proposed roof would have a 45-degree pitch. The proposed eaves and ridgeline would be set significantly above the corresponding elements of the original house. Consequently, the extension is seen as no longer being subservient to the main house. It is seen as creating an unbalanced development which would be detrimental to the character of the house and the visual amenity of the locality. The proposal is not considered to make a positive contribution to or complement the surroundings in terms of its design, appearance, height, scale and massing, and is assessed as being contrary to local development plan placemaking policies. In this case, there are no representations. However, there is a request for a site visit, but no request for a hearing. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you for that, Mr. Harrison. Is there any questions for officers on this application for review? Any questions, Councillor James?
No, I don't. Not doing.
Thank you very much. Can we then proceed to determine the application for review based on information that is before us, that is information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor? Happy to proceed? Yeah. Thank you. I will take the lead on this one, and I must say I've been up and seen the area, and which has, and I agree that there's a much variety of different conversions and new build in the area, which often it appears that some of the housing is dominant, but I think it's because of the position that when you're sitting on the road. However, this one, it's not because it's dominant over other buildings and dominant to the road. The problem we have here, that if you add another level to the existing extension, which appears to be a minimalist extension, and I'm saying that because it's only doing the extension, it therefore ends up dominant to the host building. And for that reason, I don't think in fact, I know that this wouldn't be acceptable in my mind, that you would have the host building with the extension by far dominating it, and therefore I would go with the planning department's decision on this, that with the raised wall heads, eaves, ridge levels, etc., that the design character and scale and the proportions is massing of over the host dwelling, and it's contrary to our local development plan. So therefore I would go with the planning department on this and refuse. Councillor Bray.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement this time, Henry. Yeah, the officer's report says it all. It really does, and rightly so. I really think this development is a very poor effort to try and extend the house, and it falls short on many fronts, I would say. Being too high, so you have to adjust the chimney height in order to keep it. It's kept on the same footprint to try and adhere to the requirement there, and it just doesn't work. End of story. Happy to see this one back to the drawing board.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Convener. And just to be consistent this morning, I'll make it a majority because
Unanimous.
I think this, I would actually allow it for the reason being, there's no, in the report, there's no, doesn't raise any landscape impact issues. Impact would be limited to a streetscape. I can see that. It's also a flat roof extension. Okay, yes, it's an extension, but they're providing family accommodation on the same site, and they're changing what is essentially a flat roof extension into a two-storey building, which is the intention when they built the extension. It says, I was looking for it in the report, I can't, or in the paperwork, I can't actually find it now, I didn't mark it. But it was, the extension was built with a view to extending upwards way back then. I also think that if they were to knock this building down and rebuild it in exactly the same way, we'd allow it because nothing would be dominated. It would be a building with an extension, just the other way round. But I'm happy to go with your decision anyway. But personally, I would have allowed it. Thank you.
Is that you're going? Is it unanimous, or are you going 2-1?
Majority. I would have actually allowed them to have the extension.
So yeah. So it's 2-1.
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Consistent.
So, members, that means the majority is to refuse. If I could take both Councillor Anderson and Councillor Gray to page 149 and see whether there's any. Well, there is a required change, but of course we're no longer on the 2014 LDP. We're on the 2012. I can indicate that a straightforward transfer. I'm looking at grounded refusal number 1, the second paragraph. At the moment, it refers to PM1A and PM1BC, the Perth Kinross Local Government Plan 2014. Of course, that's now gone, as members know. A straightforward transfer would be policy 1A and 1BC of the Perth Kinross Local Government Plan 2, and then in brackets 2019. Are members content to make that change? Otherwise, content with refusal on those bases? Yes.
Yeah, happy with that.
So that would be the refusal, with Councillor James dissenting and indicating he would approve.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's the end of all the business.